Hello, everybody. It's Friday. It's midday, which means it's time for Wow Ergonomics. And this week, we've decided to allow a good part of the show over to not talking about chairs, mice, or anything like that, but actually catch up with our good friend Chris Lomas and find out, since the last time we spoke to him, where we were following him desperately around. Was it the Moldovan embassy? I think it was. Well, I'd hear comment on that in a minute.
Yeah.
And I was genuinely terrified for him because people were getting quite agitated, and it was at the point where he didn't know whether they were suddenly going to have to get out of Moldova or not. So I hope you enjoy this. This will be slightly different from normal, but sometimes you just have to do something slightly different. And today we have the wonderful Chris Lomas with us. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you both so much. And it was the Ukrainian embassy, and it was all a little bit crazy. So a lot's happened since then. Sadly, the war is continuing, which is just a shock to us all.
Yeah. How are you in yourself, sir? How have you physically been, and your family, etc., since we last spoke to you?
I could tell you things.
That's fine. We've got the time.
Well, Moldova. I was informed around shortly after I was on air with you guys. I was informed that Moldova is a very dangerous place for me and my wife, and I can't tell you the details around the conversation, but they had said, the people that called me had said that we have credible evidence that Russia is monitoring you, that you're everything they hate, you're British, outspoken, charismatic, critic of the war, critic of Mr. Putin. And if they were to invade, and this was around the 5th of May, a couple of years ago now, when they were kind of expecting Russia might make a move on Moldova, they said, you are in mortal danger. And they're monitoring you, they're monitoring your social media, and they know where you live. And you might want to leave. And so I said, no, I'm staying put, because we'd had a situation really where people were kind of looking to us, and they, people even said that if you leave, we'll panic. And so I said, I'm staying. But and then they turned to Zoe and they said, well, how tough is your wife? And I said, well, a strong breeze would blow Zoe over. And then they told me what they would do to Zoe, and that was enough. I got Zoe out the country, across the border, and then I came immediately back. And that farewell that day with Zoe was heart-wrenching, because she thought she may never see me again. And it gave us a really, really unique insight into what it must be like for these husbands and wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, saying goodbye to their loved ones, not knowing if they'll ever see each other again. And for us, it was quite a traumatic time. She was gone for 17 days. I became unpredictable, moving around, sleeping in different locations, just becoming unpredictable. And once the threat had subsided, I traveled back and brought her back. But so it's kind of been, the last 2 years has been interesting, situations like that. There's relative stability here in Moldova, but notwithstanding that, Ivan and I travel back into Ukraine regularly, back behind enemy lines. So we've been shot at, we've had missiles fly over our heads. And in fact, more recently, we've set up an office now in Ukraine, in a city called Vinnytsia. And whilst we were there doing the official opening, 46 rockets flew overhead, 32 of which were shot down by Vinnytsian air defenses. And so it's just a constant, there's a video on LinkedIn where, I'm outside the offices, which have been donated by the Ukrainian businessman who just loves what we do. And there's a famous video where I'm saying, we're outside, and the sirens are all going off. And, that's a regular occurrence. And what's really interesting is how people have adjusted. You know, back at the beginning, you know, when you'd hear a siren, everyone would scatter. And yet there's such a familiarity about it now that, you know, we were staying in a hotel, for example, and no one left the rooms, you know, and it's just kind of like, I don't know, people are resigned, I think, you know, that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Chris, it's one of those things which unfortunately happens, is that you get a major incident like what's gone on with Ukraine, and unfortunately, as time moves along, it's sort of, if you think of the list of how a news broadcast goes or a newspaper, it just unfortunately naturally, because it makes its way down the list. What's the actual situation at the moment? You know, is it as we understood it for the last 18 months, 2 years, or is there any sort of major significant shifts that are sort of happening, any changes to the situation? Because I just feel, you know, I'd like to think I'm quite up on the news, but I couldn't really tell you what the state of play is now, because it's sort of just got sadly lost in a whole load of other catastrophes that are happening around the world, unfortunately.
Exactly. Well, I have an app on my phone, and it's called the UA map, and it's not just specific actually to Ukraine, because when Ivan and I went to Turkey to assess the needs on the ground after the wake in the earthquake, there's a live app that you can look at that shows you the current situation. So shows where the missiles are, shows where the drones are, shows this, that, and the other. And it's lit up like a Christmas tree, particularly around the southeastern region. And so this war is continuing unabated. It's not died down. It's just not reported anymore. Which, Steve, if I may, it really speaks about our value system. That, you know, this this isn't blaming anyone, but we have such a hunger for fresh news that people losing their lives in a war that's been overreported no longer becomes interesting, and yet nonetheless there are women and children dying, and obviously I'm much closer to it because I'm constantly going over. So we have to monitor, as part of our own security protocols, we have to monitor the risk, and it's one of those things that, you know, if you go into a war zone, regardless of how safe you think it is, because we thought Vinnytsia was a great base, it's quite central and it's quite safe, and then we have 46 drones fly overhead, and so it's just a continual reminder that A, it's continuing, and B, nowhere's safe in Ukraine.
We've got Richard Urridge listening, who's obviously, you know, worked for the BBC, etc., and as a journalist said, old news is no news, sadly, Stephen. And I speak as an old hack. It's pushed down the news agenda by other newer stuff, very sadly. It's true. And actually, that even fits into, I know you're going to laugh a little bit here when I say a modern voice of authority, but will.i.am, I saw him yesterday or the day before, was talking about AI and the way that as mankind we are feeding AI and tech and trying to make it more intelligent, more clever, and help it to develop. And he was campaigning saying we need to start doing that with humans. We need to stop feeding tech, and we need to start thinking about how are we feeding humans, because we have become happy with a tweet, emojis, whatever. Our communication is breaking down as we feed computers to become better at communication and better at thinking and whatever. We need to start thinking again. We need to start pushing ourselves and educating ourselves again. It's a very good point.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I worry, even from my perspective, I worry about AI, our dependency on it, and everything's become artificial, hasn't it? You know, our thirst for news and entertainment is artificial by nature, because we no longer press into, dare I say, truth. And I don't want to be political when I say this, but we're content with what we're fed. And that's a massive problem. You know, free thinking seems to have come down the pecking order. You know, like Richard just said, you know, where we'll get cut off if we're not careful, but where are the free thinkers? Where are the people challenging what they're said and going beyond the narrative to say, okay, I want to know the truth, because people are dying. When the conflict in Israel happened, people were coming to me for commentary, and Hopeful's stand is on the victim side. I don't care what their color of the skin is. I will be there for the victims of poverty, crime, conflict, natural disaster, period. And people want to be drawn into sides and different things. And honestly, at the end of the day, there's children dying. We put a post out, talking of will.i.am, we put a post out today about us putting coats on hundreds of children. And I told Eugene, our social media guy, our videographer, please use the will.i.am or the Black Eyed Peas song,
Where's Love?
Where's Love?
Yeah.
And, because people are dying, and we become so comfortable sitting in our armchair, just allowing someone else to tell us what news is, allowing someone else to tell us what is important and what is not important. And we've got to go beyond that, and I'm unique because I'm on the front line. I see the impact, I see the faces, I see the effect. And so I have that unique ability. You guys are 1,400 miles or kilometers, whatever it is, away, and so everything is sterilized. Everything is okay. This is the news according to, not. Does that make sense? Forgive me.
No, it makes total sense. And do you know what? News actually comes, or real news comes from real stories, and that can come from anywhere. And I think we just stop looking for it in the right places. I interviewed a musician yesterday who's based in Georgia, and I mean, he was telling me the most shocking story. He said that there are farmers on the sort of Georgia Chechnya border, and quite often they will wake up and one of their sheep will be, or one of their cows will be now in Russia,
right?
Because the Russians are creeping. And he said he's seen them then having to, the cow that they milked freely the day before, they're now having to milk it through barbed wire.
And this is people's reality. This is, this is what people are living with. And I mean, how, okay, slightly different for me, but how blessed we are, that for people that live in the UK and the US, okay, we have our own problems, we have our own issues, but it's, there's not a high probability that you're going to leave the house today and get blown up. And so, yeah, it's a challenging one. So, for example, Kherson, Ivan and I have been in Kherson a few times. We were there when it was occupied. We were there when it was liberated, and now it's occupied apparently again. And it's just this to and froing, and I don't want to comment too much on the war in terms of my opinion, because it's only an opinion. But I think this is still a long way off. I think Russia is trying to wear Ukraine down. I monitor the US debt clock, and their not only their appetite, but their ability to continue to provide funds. And yeah, it's a difficult one, because there's a lot at stake if Ukraine stumbles.
How as ordinary citizens, Chris, do we get this? And UK citizens, how do we get this back up the agenda and back at the top of the news? I know we're sort of, how we can, people like yourself are doing a fabulous job, and we hear lots of great positive things that are happening. But how do we keep people in the UK reminded about what's going on? As I say, if we acknowledge it's gone down the list, as it were, because of things like what's happening with Gaza, what's happening with the Houthis, etc. How do we get it prominent again and back in the forefront of people's minds? Or can we do anything?
Yeah, I was smiling because I keep saying that, and who am I? But I keep saying, yeah, if I die, it's crazy, because you need another micro disaster. You need something that's going to directly affect the reporting nation, like, for example, UK, US. There's got to be something that makes it intimate again. And until that happens, it's just another war. And the fact that we have so many going on right now is just, it's heartbreaking. And okay, what do you report on? You know, do you report on the latest, or do you continue reporting on one that's been going on for 2 years now? And you know, mindful that we're in February, so you know, in 22 days time, you know, we're marking 2 years since the commencement, and it's just crazy. I mean, this is 2024. It's not, you know, it's not like in the Middle East where we've almost become accustomed to, you know, to regular wars and conflicts. This is in Europe, you know, and it's, you know, we're in the territory of the world wars now, you know, any longer, and it's going to be up there, but it's just not a world war right now. So I don't know.
It's the age-old thing. How do you get over apathy?
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult, isn't it? I guess there's so many people out there that will say that, you know, we have our own problems, you know, and they will turn and say, you know, we're you know, still struggling out of COVID, we're still struggling out of Brexit, we've got a cost of living crisis, you know, we're trying to keep our heads afloat here. You know, it just doesn't, but it just doesn't compare. That's the thing. It really just doesn't compare with what's happening on the other side of the world. But unfortunately, those things will come to the fore. People will start to feel that. People will even start to feel they've done their bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And I think, you know, I kind of bringing it to Hope for a second, and charity in general. I think we have a responsibility, and I think the problem as well is as people start to count the cost of their own situations, and I'm not talking about the mega wealthy, because that's a separate question. But this is why, and this isn't a kind of political broadcast on behalf of the Hope For Party, but this for me is why we have to be transparent, that we have to build that trust up in charity again. You know, I work alongside UNHCR, and I hope they're not watching this right now, but, you know, UNHCR, World Food Program, blah, 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 you know, where there is a colossal machine that needs feeding before anyone gets the benefit of the donations they've received. And we've got to look at agility. We've got to look at transparency. We've got to look at, you know, I still don't draw a salary, you know, because my wife and I have this commitment. Plus, we're suspended by family, particularly my sister in America and her husband. But we want to infuse some integrity, whereby, and getting to my point, whereby people say, okay, I've got a little bit. It's no longer going in the top of a hopper just to be dissipated instantly, but I can actually see and track how I'm making an impact on the lives of refugees, or the lives of people suffering poverty in Moldova, or the lives of, and we need a restoration, and they're out there. I'm not the only one, but we need a restoration in a revolution almost in the charity sector, where people say, okay, I still care, and I believe that whatever I can give will make a massive difference, let alone then addressing, you know, the corporates who have these massive expenditures. And traditionally, and I think I may have mentioned at the beginning of the war, a church in the UK contacted me. They had £50,000 to invest, and they said we were just about to give it to another, but someone recommended I interview you, and so I gave my pitch on what we would do with it, the whole 50,000. And then I didn't hear anything. And I chased and chased and chased. And in the end, I said, look, I know we've not won it, but I just want some feedback. And the guy came on the phone and said, I've been ignoring your calls purely out of shame, because we gave it to another. And I said, well, what was it I said? He said, that's the point. I trusted you, and I knew that every penny would be used in the way that you intended. It's just that Hope For doesn't look so good on a letterhead. And I said, well, how much of that money then do you think went to support refugees directly? And he said, that's the thing, I don't think a single penny. And whilst that conversation exists, there's got to be a seismic shift in terms of how charities operate. And there's very little regulation. You know, a charity can spend 80% on themselves and 20% on the people they exist to serve. No one stops them. You know, it becomes a consumer choice then in terms of where they place their money. And it can't be it can't be a box ticking exercise. Well, I put it to the British Heart Foundation. This isn't me saying how they spend their money, but we know these big corporates, you know, the CEOs earn $250,000. You know, I'm pretty sure that if I had enough, I could go off and get a $250,000 job now, but it wouldn't make a difference. It wouldn't make an impact.
Wow. That's quite something. And it's something that we all need to consider. Let's turn that round. How can any business that's watching this over the next few days as it streams out, how can they actually help you?
Well, you know, so we've been here 3 years in 15 days time. So we're kind of building up for our 3rd anniversary. And I think we've paid our dues. I think we've proved over and over and over again how transparent and how impactful we are. So particularly from a CSR perspective, you know, what better way for your shareholders, for your stakeholders, to say, okay, we're a philanthropic organization, than to place it, whether it's with me or someone else, but to place it somewhere where you can say, look, that's where that's how it worked. That's what happened to your support. So, for example, BidFood UK, you know, have just been, you know, singularly one of our biggest supporters. The CEO, Andrew Selly, oh my goodness. But they supply us with food, and then they watch what happens to that food. Oakland International, who fund our warehouse, and they're just about to send a truckload of clothes over. There'll be no confusion for organizations like that in terms of how their support is spent, whether it's cash or in kind. And you know, we took a dip because the war's no longer vogue and people just don't send any money for Ukrainian refugees anymore. But the in-kind aid has just increased and increased. There's an organization in the UK called Goods for Good, Rosalind Bluestone, who's just recently got an MBE. You know, they've supplied us with millions of pounds worth of brand new clothing. And why is she doing that? Why is BidFood, Oakland, Goods for Good, and other organizations plowing so much energy into Hope 4? It's because they see it. There's no confusion. You know, there's no siphoning away. It's just complete clarity, and they get to witness firsthand. And I talk about in real time, in real life, they get to witness in time and in real time, real life, how their impact is making a difference. That has got to set the standard, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to rewrite the book on charity. You know, where we keep a lean team. Okay, I've got a small team. But we keep a lean team, we keep our operational costs at a minimum so we can give everyone the biggest bang for their buck.
Now, you talked about the fact that this war is probably, and we can all probably see that it's going to go on and on and on. But even if, just to give people an idea, even if this all stopped tomorrow, how long, in your estimation, would it take for a country like Ukraine to actually get back to where it was?
So the reason we set up an office in Ukraine is because we anticipate something happening. Now, if they lose the war, then I'm not going to be welcome in Ukraine. And if we get time, I want to talk about how brilliant the UK passport office is. I know that soun's crazy, but
no, let's do that.
No, yeah, really definitely.
Okay, I'm going to say it now then, and then I'll come back. We're running out of pages because we cross borders so much. So in anticipation, because we've only got one passport and we live in Moldova, I wrote to the UK passport office and said, you know, we need to replace our passport. Now, traditionally now you have to send the passport back before they send yours. And I wrote to them and said, not possible. We need the passport and then we'll send it back. And they studied us and they came back and said, I didn't even know this a thing. I hope I'm allowed to say this, but they said, you qualify for a second passport. So we now are in receipt of 2 UK valid passports.
Oh,
Wow.
And the reason is A, because we're frequent travelers, but B, they said, you're going into countries that may or may not be in conflict with each other. You have to be able to have the ability of plausible deniability. So, no, I've not been into Ukraine, and give them a neutral passport, still a valid UK passport. So that's absolutely fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say that they've sent you a massive passport.
Yeah.
Like it was like this thick.
Yeah.
No,
So
no,
that you could go.
no. I feel like a 007, honestly, carrying 2 passports.
Which passport do you want, sir?
Exactly. But just to answer your question, there's 2 things are going to happen. There's massive concern that when the war finishes and men are allowed to go across borders, they've got one choice. Here's the thing, not so much for the people in Moldova, because Moldova is not necessarily your country of destination. The reason women are residing in Moldova is because they have quick access back home.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so much of Ukraine is devastated. People, women and children who have settled in the UK or France or Germany or wherever it is, really developed nations, what's going to happen? The wife is not going to go back to a war-torn country. The husband is going to join the wife. And so you're going to have a massive depopulation. And the Ukrainian government's aware of this, that there is just going to be such a vacuum in terms of manpower, of resources. It's going to hit the GDP. The country's income is going to plummet. And so a lot of emphasis will be on, okay, how do we retain people? How do we put in mechanisms for construction and growth, and to invigorate the economy, to get people back to the country? Otherwise, the country, it's going to be like Moldova. Moldova suffers depopulation, and it's down to 2.5 million. And okay, Ukraine's a much bigger country, but it needs more people to function. And so you're going to have a situation where there's going to be mass depopulation if indeed the hypothesis is correct, and men travel to those destination countries because it's a better place to live anyway, and the wives have been given citizenship and all of this sort of carry on. For us, because we're going to be in the heart of Ukraine, it's going to take on a whole different complexion, and we want to, from an ethical perspective, to ensure that any money we attract is spent in the most ethical and prudent way possible. We want to be in there. We want to be a part of a Ukraine solution, as much as we are now, because obviously we've set up through Oakland International a distribution hub for food manufacturers across the Southeast to gain access to the UK retail market as a way of stimulating some economic recovery. And in fact, there's loads of things happening, but in fact, we're also using our contacts across the UK and Europe and US to now bring investment into Moldova to create sustainable jobs for both Moldovans and Ukrainians within Moldova. And so there's a huge amount going on, but because I'm a businessman, right? And so behind the coats and behind the food and behind the wonderful things that help to sustain life is a greater strategy that is designed to be part of the country's recovery, both Moldova and Ukraine.
Yeah,
I remember hearing or reading something a few months ago very similar to what Chris had just said there, and I think it was referencing Albania. And I think obviously Albania being a very poor, again, traditional sort of Eastern European country, and they had that sort of problem, not a war issue as such, but it was people sort of leaving Albania to go to Germany and France and the UK, and a poor country was then getting poorer because the small villages then had no men of working age, and therefore the economy just sort of imploded, as it were, because there was no one there to generate the money or to work the fields or do the job. So people moved away because it was poor, but by moving away to find something better, you were actually making the original country even poorer. And that's what you're saying is it's going to replicate, yes, because of war, but it's the same sort of Patterns will develop.
And that's always been the problem, hasn't it? Over the years, and I say years, I mean over centuries, we've seen that you get a war-torn area, you get a migration, and then you end up with actually civil war, because actually what happens is that you've got so many seismic social problems within what's left. People then start fighting amongst themselves.
Yeah, and we've got a slightly different issue in Moldova as well, and that is the attention's now turned to social cohesion. So how to make the Moldovans feel valued, because obviously for the last 2 years, every bit of focus has been on bringing support into Europe's poorest country for Ukrainians, and Moldovans are like, but we're poor.
What about us?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's been a real shift to social cohesion, to supporting Moldovans as much as Ukrainians. But here's the point, and I had a meeting with the State Secretary for Labor and Social Protection a while back. He's not returned my calls because of this conversation. But see, I'm very outspoken because I can see what the issue is. I can see what the problem is. And Moldova, as an example, has suffered, I said suffered, 33 years of charity. Now, charity doesn't work. And I'm going to qualify what I mean. Because if you're constantly giving handouts and not hand-ups, you break, you validate brokenness, you validate people's identity, you reinforce this expectation in people. And so instead of becoming part of their own solution, they stay broken. And so we refuse to be that. Yes, people are hungry. Yes, people need clothes. And yes, but they've got to be part of their own solution. And so that's why it's important to us to create an environment where we facilitate inward investment. And in fact, a couple of my board members are doing that. But B, we inspire. I said to the State Secretary, we've got to make being Moldovan sexy. There's no hero. There's no hero. We're supporting Moldovan gymnastics, for example, in a small way. But we heard a story. We met a brilliant young gymnast who was an Olympic hopeful. And she retired at 15, just when she was about to break onto the Olympic stage. And we said, why? She said, I couldn't afford the £40 a month medical bills to keep my body in condition. And so we've purposed to launch Hope for Academy, because it's all great saying, okay, the poor kids, they'll always be poor kids. But what about creating heroes? What about getting around these incredible, whether it's children or adults, getting around these incredible people that can stay and be part of the future, that will end up being the hero that I can't be. I'm not Moldovan. That they will end up being the hero the country needs. And the other thing is, I said to Domnul Kushka, he's called, Mr. Kushka. I said, it's just occurred to me, you're responsible for jobs, right? And he said, yes. And I said, the definition of insanity? And he said, yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I said, yes, your policies are insane, because there is no wonder he's not called me, right? There is no back to work strategy. We have it in the UK. There's no going into schools and getting around young children and teaching them even the most basic skills like writing CVs, how to dress. I employ people. They turn up, my goodness, you think they've just come from the farmyard. How to present themselves, question and answers, body language. There's nothing like that. And I said to him, I can write you something. I can do this for you. Just give me a call. And crickets. But we know, not the only one, but we know what the country needs. It's just having that buy-in from a post-Soviet mentality that hasn't shifted. And the problem is, your bright students, as soon as they get their qualifications, where are they going? They're not staying here. And so this is what I say when I say we've got to make Moldova sexy. We've got to give people a reason to stay, and that's through job creation, not just earning £250 a month, pulling cabbages up, but something that excites them to attract industry that can really help Moldova trade itself out of poverty.
Chris, what does UK investment and involvement in Moldova look like? Is any of the big sort of corporate organisations that we have in the UK? Do they have facilities, operations, production plans? What does it look like? How involved is the UK in Moldova at the present?
So from my perspective right now, it's not huge. I talked about two of my board members. One is in process. I took him to see the State Secretary for Economy a couple of months ago, but another one is investing 17 million in a production plant here in Cahul. They're both on my board. And that creates jobs. Now, I'm not seeing, from my perspective, a huge UK presence here. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I am seeing other industries and countries come. For example, you have a lot of Japanese car parts manufacturers who, and this again is where I make myself unpopular with my anti-trafficking hat on, who simply cite their businesses here to take advantage of cheap labor. And again, I said this to the State Secretary. Oh my goodness, I hope he's not watching. I said, look, your issue, and I sit on the government's anti-trafficking task force as well. And I say this to them as well. So it's not as if I'm saying anything I shouldn't, but I say to them, the issue is, and you need to be really, really careful, that you might actually have state-sponsored exploitation. Because if you're attracting investment into a country purely so that country can keep your citizens poor by paying 6,000 lei a month, which is £250 a month, then that's not the answer. And in fact, you've just signed off on statewide exploitation. And I said to them, the easiest thing in the world is to legislate, and whether you did it in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, whatever, but you legislated to foreign business. Look, we still have a lot to add. We've got a lot of value. Our workers are really hardworking, and they are. But we insist that you pay them a living wage, and that's an easy fix. And
not just pay them, but educate them and expect them to move on, right? Exactly,
but within the country.
Yeah,
to create an environment again where people want to stay. And the same will be with Ukraine. When this war is finally over, it will be the same challenges. Okay, how do you very, very quickly make being Ukrainian sexy? And they're very proud. Don't get me wrong; they are incredibly, insanely proud. But there will be a vacuum where men have a choice. Do I go with my wife in the lavishness of the UK, France, wherever it is, or US, or do I stay and be part of my country's future? And that's what we need.
Taking this all the way back round to roughly where we started it, I was thinking right in the middle of that. It's true, isn't it? With countries like Moldova or even the Ukraine or whatever, quite so often in the UK, we'd only ever actually look on a map, go, oh, it's there, and think about them if they win something like the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah.
Right? It takes some kind of entertainment value driven thing for us to go, oh, where's that?
Yeah.
What's happening there?
And Graham, this is why, for me, the work that we do and the community that we belong to, because we're different. We applied for a grant recently, weren't successful, and the team were really sad. And I said, actually, that's not what we're about. We're not about competition. We're not trying to compete with the same pot of money. We have our own relationships with incredible people right across this platform, incredible people that are on our board of directors like Leah Turner and Luke Beckley and Dean Atwell and Ryan Singlehurst. People that believe in what we're doing and their network as well, all contributing to a phenomenal opportunity to make massive impact without the dilution, without the wastage of others. And the more people that get involved, whether it's cash or in kind or whatever, or lending resources. I climbed a little hill last week. And during that process, there were people that said, okay, Chris, I haven't got the cash other people have got, but I've got resources. I can help you make a massive difference. You know, we're back to this. Okay, what does it look like? And it can be anything, because each of us has a value. And even if it is £5, ask me what I can do with £5. You know, it doesn't matter, but we have an opportunity as a collective. LinkedIn is a force for good. Now, if I could mobilize everyone across this platform, we're changing entire nations.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? Stephen, what can the ergonomics community do? That's a question.
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. There's a lot of people in there. There's a lot of very good people. So I think it's one for us to maybe take off air, Graham, and have a conversation with some of the really sort of prominent people in the UK ergo sort of field, you know, and you know, some very well educated and very caring people who I think we can maybe sort of put a few heads together and see what we can do and how can we contribute. So I think it's one to take off air, Graham, and me and you have a conversation. I think there's a few people we can sort of pull together and say, right, look, there's a fantastic piece of work being done by Chris and the team at Hope for. What can we do? How can we contribute to it? So I think we take that away. We'll come back with something and see where we can support.
Amazing. Yeah. And we've just launched in the UK. So we're now amplifying operations in the UK, which makes all the sense in the world, because we've got UK food and products providers who want to send us stuff to the UK. So actually, our team is based out of Hampshire, specifically Portsmouth, and we're looking for a warehouse, just, you know, maybe a few pallet spaces. So Bid Food and Goods for Good can send us some stock that we can start operations across, first of all, the south of the UK. But you know, this is the thing. As
does it need to be in that area, Chris? It needs to be as close to. It
needs to be within drive of, you know, so they can access the stock without moving house. Okay. But just something in that area, just a corner of a warehouse maybe. So we can start, because again, this is cookie cut territory, because the more people that get involved with Hope For, the more we can reach. And this isn't about dilution. This is not about spreading ourselves thin. This is about saying, okay, you know, we can set up operations wherever we like. And then, you know, because people may not want to donate to Moldova and Ukraine, but they may want to donate to poor people in the UK. Or wherever it is. You know, we went to Tanzania. Everyone's aware. You know, if you follow me, I climbed a hill called Kilimanjaro, 5,895 meters. And you know, we saw firsthand the devastation there. And I have a heart for people. You know, I can't just walk past someone in the street who's in need and ignore them and say, oh no, my focus is. So when I saw the need, I just said to the guys locally, you know, we are Hope for Tanzania. Give me time. You know, I'm not talking about next week. Aspirationally, I'd love it to be, but I'm not talking about next week. But we have an opportunity. And if I can create and demonstrate a new way of doing things that isn't about me, you know, I've given up my life. It's not about me. I don't dream about cars. I don't dream about houses. I dream about helping people. And if we can raise up people right across the world that share that same vision under the banner of Hope For, we can do something really, really special.
It's been really powerful having you on as normal, Chris. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time today.
Can I talk about the hill?
Yeah,
talk about it. Please.
My goodness. My message to anyone thinking about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro: don't do it. It's horrible.
Right.
Oh my word! Listen, there was some issues going into it. They're well documented. I'm not allowed to talk about them now because it's the subject of a police investigation. But and I keep saying it's not what happened; it's what happened next. That is amazing. You know, 26 people finally, or most of them climbing for Hope For, just defying all the obstacles. And moving mountains of a similar size to the one we climbed, but it was hellacious. That's a word we kept using. It was hellacious. 8-hour climbs every day. The minute the sun went down, freezing cold, sleeping on the sides of mountains and slipping out your bed every night, so you're not really sleeping, suffering altitude sickness, So you're not really able to eat that much. And then you get to summit day and night, and you climb 6 hours, camp, eat, sleep for a couple of hours, get up at 10, eat again, and then climb through the night 9 hours to the summit of Kilimanjaro, take your pictures, and then sprint down 1,000 meters to adjust for your lungs. And you can tell my voice isn't great because I suffered a little bit of altitude sickness while I was up there, and I really need to get myself checked out. But it's an experience. But had someone sat me down and said, look, I'm going to tell you what it's going to be like. For example, the first night we got to camp, my hips were burning, my legs were burning, my lungs were burning. And I went into dinner and immediately left the table and threw up. And that was day one. And wow. how I survived, how all of us survived. Not everyone made it to the summit, but everyone made it to their particular summit. I did get to summit, and I'm really proud. And my colleague Ivan did, and we call him the mountain goat because he was just like, he's the only one that found it easy, but the rest of us, it was like, if I'd truly known. So if anyone's thinking of climbing it, speak to me first. At least you're going to it knowing the horror of it. But nonetheless, I'm proud. And now I've stopped crying. I'm proud.
Richard, so get that cough seen too, Chris. And if anyone's listening today and they're thinking of moaning about having to walk through a little bit of rain or drizzle or whatever to pick the kids up from school, that kind of puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Mm-hmm.
And plus, we raised £53,000. That's so proud.
That's the bit right there. Listen, I hope this challenges people. This has been a different Wow Ergonomics today. We didn't really talk about ergonomics, but we did talk about something that's very much human factors, and that's the important thing. This is all about humans, and ergonomics is about helping people make a change in their life. For the better, for the well-being. So if this isn't ergonomics in a way, then what is? Yeah. I hope if you've been listening, you've been challenged today. If you haven't connected with Chris already on LinkedIn or any other platform, please do follow Hope 4. If you've been watching this, if you've got a warehouse facility somewhere at Portsmouth, you said, yeah,
just around that area, Portsmouth.
If you've got a warehouse facility down on that coast, or even a bit of a big warehouse, and you can spare a bit of it, do get in touch with Chris. He'd really love to hear from you. Let's see what we can do, folks. We can all make a bit of a difference if we actually put our minds to it, and that's all that really needs to happen. Until next week, when we'll be back and we will be talking probably more about ergonomics. Thank you so much to Chris and your conversation from Hope 4. Thanks to Stephen as well. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cheers, Chris. Good to see you.
You too.